Well, everyone will just take a minute or two for the start. Hello, everyone. Today's session is brought to you by Advanced eClinical Training, who provides online healthcare training and medical certification programs, and Vida Volunteer, an organization that positively impacts the quality of life in underserved communities. For today's session, we have Andres F. Diaz, who is an MD PhD student at the University of Arizona College of Medicine. He was born in Colombia and moved to the US at the age of 11. Since then, he has been involved in AMSA and is the current student editor of The New Physician. He is also passionate about oncology and public health and hopes to address health disparities in cancer care, where he plans to nurture a practice that commits to communities underrepresented in research literature. Please give it up for Andres. All right, if you could just unmute yourself, Andres. Thank you so much.
Yep. Can you guys hear me? All right.
Perfect.
All right. Let me share my slides. Can everyone see my slides? Oh, wrong slides. My apologies, guys. Didn't think this would be so difficult. There we go. Can everyone see my slides now? Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Andres Diaz. I am an MD PhD student from the University of Arizona, College of Medicine, Tucson, and I'm here very excited to both represent the New Physician magazine and the American Medical Student Association to talk to you about non-academic writing. Having some issue. My apologies, y'all. What's going on?
It's okay, Andres. Do you want to send us the slides and we can share it in our end?
Perhaps, yes. My apologies.
It's all right. Shoot me an email.
Okay.
But while we're waiting for Andres to do that, everybody, I would love to hear where y'all tuning from. Where are you at in the world? Put it in the chat. Tampa, Florida. Nice. Buffalo, New York. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, but I grew up in Orlando. New York City, Dallas, or all over. And are you all pre-med or PhD or both? Maybe want to do MD, PhD. San Francisco, nice. Pre-PA, I love it. Edison, New Jersey. And I know I asked that question what your favorite sessions were, but I'd love to ask again since we have more engagement in the chat. I know someone said choosing a surgical versus non-surgical career. I really liked healthcare and AI with Dr. He. Freshman pre-med, nice. Getting started early. It's what I like to see. Andres, do I have my email?
No, I sent it to Ronnie.
Okay. Brandy, go ahead and share your screen.
Got it.
Okay, my apologies, guys. I might be in med school, but I still don't know how to do PowerPoint. But anyways, I'm happy to get started. You could go to the next slide, Ronnie. So again, just a brief introduction. I'm currently serving as chief editor of the New Physician magazine, and the fellow underneath his name is Dr. Pete Thompson. He's the chief communications officer for the American Medical Student Association. In short, what that means is that he's my boss, and we work together. Well, he's my boss, but we work together on the magazine to put together the magazine. And I'll talk to you later about the magazine, but I did want to give him some credit. He's an amazing writer and educator. Next slide. Here are some QR codes for our magazine. The magazine is published bi-monthly. It's free of charge for all medical students, anybody, medical educators. We get a lot of readers that are non-medical students. But I encourage you, if you have a minute, to get access to the magazine and just kind of look at some of the stuff that we're publishing. That will become more relevant as we progress through the presentation, because I am gonna encourage you guys to start submitting your pieces to our publication and other publications. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes, just a minute or 30 seconds or so. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. So I always like starting this session by asking two primary questions. I want to see in the audience if anybody has ever published through a non-academic publication or a non-academic editorial. So just throw your answers in the chat if you have. Yeah, and if you haven't published, just say no. Oh, nice. Yes, poetry counts. If poetry does count, Artie. Excellent. So there's a mix, but historically, when you're looking at pre-health students, I'll speak for me as a pre-medical student. Well, a lot of people before they apply, or a lot of people when they're in the pre-health stage, don't publish in non-academic journals. They normally publish in non-academic journals later on in life, and really later on in their career, and really what they're focusing on is academic publications. And I think there's a missed opportunity there, because they don't understand that not only do you not have to be an expert in the field or a physician or be later on in your career to publish in non-academic publications, but also that non-academic publications are just as important as academic publications when it comes to your application. So to answer kind of the second question, is non-academic writing important for my future as a pre-health professional? currently as a pre-health student, but in the future as a health professional? And the answer is yes. A lot of people tend to focus on academic publications. And what do I mean by academic publications? Next slide. When people think of publishing research, they think of Nature, Science, JAMA, PNSA, a lot of these large academic, and for our context, medical journals that focus exclusively on research, be it clinical research, be it basic research, be it translational research. And that's really important for you at the stage that you're at. But the truth is, that's not the only way to contribute to writing. And it's not the only way that you can write in your applications that you have published. Academic writing and publishing in academic journals is very powerful, but it can also be very, very difficult, especially as pre-health professionals. You know, you have to be in a lab, you have to be with a PI that's encouraging you to publish. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And a lot of these journals tend to be less forgiving for pre-health students. That's where now we have the opportunity to publish in non-academic journals. Now, what do I mean by non-academic? I keep saying non-academic journal, non-academic publication. What does that mean? It essentially means anything that is not peer reviewed by a collection of doctors or physicians or scientists for the scientific literature. It does not mean that it's not edited and reviewed by a panel of editors and writers, but it does mean that it would not be considered part of a scientific journal. Now, as you can imagine, everything that is not a non-scientific journal includes a lot of things. That can be anything from narrative medical writing. Some of the greatest books that have come out in the past decade or 2 decades have been from physicians writing non-academically as opposed to academically. The Emperor of All Maladies, Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, When Breath Becomes Air. These are all narratives. These are all non-medical yet medically related narratives and stories. And obviously these are exceptions to the rule. These are huge books that took them many years to write, but that would be considered a non-academic publication. It also includes articles in Time magazine, articles in your school newspaper, articles in our magazine, articles in your city's newspaper. It could be a newsletter for a website. It could be, technically, some would argue that social media and Twitter and especially extended forms of posts are considered non-academic writing because they are a short story. So when you think of non-academic writing, I really want you to open up your horizons to all of the opportunities that you have to publish. There is a lot of options out there. And normally what I urge pre-health students to do is think about your school's newspaper. That is an excellent way to get started with non-academic writing. If you reach out to your school newspaper and you tell them, hey, I have a story that I would like to share with you. I'm a student at this institution and I'm trying to become a chiropractic doctor or a PA or a physician, and this is why this is important to me. School newspapers are normally a really easy option to get published in non-academic writing, but it really expands. There's a lot of options out there. Now, academic journals historically have very high, what we call editorial integrity, meaning that there is a set of reviewers that are normally experts in the field reviewing your piece specifically to ensure that it meets the criteria for their academic journal. Non-academic journals have something similar, although much less rigorous. But when you're considering submitting a piece for a non-academic journal, let's say your school newspaper, consider whether they have editorial integrity. And what do I mean by editorial integrity is how rigorous are they going to be about your piece? You don't want to submit your work in a journal that has no editorial integrity or that does not review your work. Why would that be? Because you want your piece to, when you submit your piece to a journal and it is published, let's say I'm submitting to my school newspaper, if it's not edited, looked over, if it's not formatted for their publication, and it gets published, it's out there, and it may make you look bad. So you want to be able to have an editorial team that you can work with to make your piece better, because the reality is when you submit something, it's not ready for publication. It never is. It always needs a change. It always needs to be reformatted. So when you're looking at places that you're interested in publishing in, remember, you want a place that will look at your piece and will help you make it better. And school newspapers are a great place to start. So you don't want to go into a platform that we call frictionless. So a frictionless platform would be a medium that doesn't have any sort of review. So maybe just somebody's newsletter, and that's excellent. You're more than able to publish in something like that, like a newsletter or a blog, and that's great. And I certainly promote that. But when you're really looking at submitting pieces that are maybe journalistic in nature, you really want to look for a place that has editorial integrity. Now, this last part, I cannot stress enough, guys. You do not have to be an expert in the field or the field that you're talking about to write about it. Journalists are not experts in the things that they write about, but they pull on experts to make their writing stronger, right? And that's really important to understand, especially for the stage that you're at. As a pre-health student, you might not be an expert in vaccination protocols in your city, but you know that you can reach out to experts who might be experts in that specific topic in vaccinations, physicians, community health workers, public health workers in your city, and they are the experts that will support your piece. So I don't want you to not want to write a piece or feel like you're unable to write a piece because you're not an expert, because the reality is you don't have to be an expert to write about it. It helps if you know about it, but you can also learn. That's what Google's for. That's what other individuals that you can reach out to as a source are for. And the second reason I want you to understand you don't have to be an expert is that as pre-health students, future medical students, future PA students, as pre-health students, you have a very unique perspective. You have a unique perspective on what it's like to be a pre-health student. You have a unique perspective on what it's like to study for the MCAT, what it's like to prepare applications, what it's like to take organic chemistry twice, what it's like to be in a college setting with the pressure of excelling academically so you could pursue your pre-health path. And there's a lot of stories around that experience. And I really compel you to understand that you are an expert in that experience. And you should really leverage that if you feel like you can talk about it and you would like to share your story, because that has a lot of power. And there's a lot of people in your shoes that would really benefit from your perspective, from a different perspective. You might not be an expert in surgical oncology and the removal of tumors in children, but you are an expert in your experience, and that's worth a lot. And if you want to write about surgical oncology and the removal of tumors, you can reach out to a surgical oncologist. So just to finish this slide, if you get anything out of this presentation, is you don't have to be an expert in the field to write in a non-academic journal, or just generally. Next slide. Now, why is non-academic writing important beyond the opportunity to publish stories that are not just about academia and research? They're also an opportunity to enhance health literacy. So what is health literacy? Health literacy gets tossed around a lot in academic settings, in hospitals. We have to make sure patients are health literate. We got to make sure that the general publication is health literate. And I feel like this is a phrase that's often overused but misunderstood. Next slide. Health literacy really comes down to three primary factors. Is the content that I am writing readable? And what I mean by readable is it readable to the audience that you're targeting? And often, is it readable to the general population? Is the information that I'm writing about written in plain language? Plain language avoids jargon, avoids excessive, complicated, complex writing, and it's just a simple way to write where you can understand when individuals who read your piece understand all of the info that is on there. And really what makes health literacy is if the content is readable, it's written in plain language, and someone can make an informed decision about it, then you're really hitting that trifecta of what health literacy is. Often when we think of health literacy, we only think of, well, how does this help your patient deal with their disease? Is a health literate patient someone who understands their medication? Is a health literate patient someone who understands that if they don't take their medication, their disease is going to progress? But health literacy goes way beyond that. It really goes into the general population, and it also goes to physicians. Physicians also have to be health literate, not only in their specialty, but their specialty of others, of their peers, and also in other forms of healing that include alternative forms of healing. Whether they practice those forms or not, they have to be health literate about these forms of healing so they can best help their patients, which are often diverse patients with different beliefs. So when you hear the term health literacy, I want you to really think of the last part. Is a piece that promotes health, is something that you write that promotes health literacy does it allow others to make an informed decision? So when you're writing a piece, a non-academic piece, I want you to think of these three components because they're really going to make your writing not only more approachable and more actionable, but they're also going to make it easier to write for you because you have these three parameters that you're going to kind of focus on. Next slide. Now, I'm just going to address some common misconceptions before we do a quick thought exercise. A lot of pre-health students feel like they can't, write for an academic journal or for, in this case, a non-academic journal to promote, to publish something in a non-academic journal because they're not a good writer. That's often a misconception. Many studies have shown that by JAMA, many studies have shown that pre-health students are on average better writers than the average college student. So in a university, pre-health students are historically better writers than their peers, even though as science students, they feel that they are not. Now, study aside, writing is difficult. The best way to improve writing is to write more. But the reality is that most of us, especially at the stage that you guys are good enough writers to start publishing in non-academic journals. Even if it's something as simple as your school newspaper, your town's newspaper, or a website that you can reach out to, such as MedEd or ScholarRx, a lot of these kind of websites that do newsletters, or even the American Medical Student Association. You already are good enough, a good enough writer to start doing some of these smaller publications, shorter pieces. Now, are you a good writer? None of us are good writers. One of my favorite books of all time is On Writing by Stephen King. And in the book, he doesn't even really talk about how he became a writer. All he does is talk about how bad of a writer he is and how he gets away with it. It's an amazing book. And one of the tenets of the book is that nobody's really a good writer. We're just getting better. And that's so true, guys. Are you guys amazing authors? No. But are you a good enough writer to get started in non-academic publishing? Of course, 100%. You have enough education to get started in that. Second misconception, I have no writing or journalism background. You don't, like I said, you don't have to be an expert, and you certainly do not have to have professional writing background to get started in non-academic writing. You just got to start writing, get some pieces that you submit denied, and just keep submitting them. Next thing you know, you have 10 publications before you submit your application for med school or your pre-health program. Submitting written content can be daunting and inaccessible. We will destroy that misconception in our next slide, in the next couple slides. I am only interested in creative and narrative writing, and that is not considered non-academic writing. Poetry, personal stories, short stories, photography, visual arts, that is all considered non-academic publishing. So if you like poetry and you like submitting poetry, that counts as a publication, guys, and you can submit that. And there's a lot of journals, some of them want like ours, and others I will lay out that you can publish in. So it doesn't have to be a journalistic story. It often is, but it doesn't have to. If you like creative writing, lean into that and start publishing some of those stories. And don't be afraid. You will get denied a couple of times, but those stories have a lot of value. And ultimately, the last one really ties all of them together, which is, why would anybody be interested in what I have to say? Now, that's more of a personal question, but the truth is if you leave this seminar with anything, is two things. One, you don't have to be an expert. And two, you have a voice. You have a very powerful, important voice. There is a lot of people out there, academically and non-academically, who want to hear your experience, who want to hear what you're passionate about, who want to hear about what you care about. And one of the reasons they do want to hear that is because you're the future health professionals of this country. Your ideas, your values, what you believe in, what you care about is really important. It's really important to everyone because you will become the future healers of America. Not to sound too cliche or cheesy, but that's entirely true. Next slide, Ronnie. So I just wanted to do a quick thought exercise while you guys are maybe coming up with some questions. And maybe we can decrease the times here for 2 minutes for each. I want you to think of something that you want to write about. Just kind of mull it over in your head. What is it, something that I've always wanted to write about? Is it a personal story, like a narrative story? Is it a journalistic story? And I want you to think about, are you knowledgeable about this story? So just kind of think about what is something that I've been wanting to write about for some time. So I'll give you guys like a couple seconds. So I see in the chat, expensive and unfair MCAT preparation. That's a really good story that's super relevant to you that you guys can talk about because you guys are all pre-health students. So again, are you an expert in the finances of medical education? Probably not, but that's okay. You have a personal experience that you can pull on. And if you want to start adding some reliable information and facts on top of that, you can reach out to sources. You can also interview other students. I see another one that says MCAT being pass-fail. That's a great story. Again, you don't have to be an expert in it, but you can lean into your personal experience with the MCAT to kind of make an argument for why MCAT should be pass-fail. And there's a lot of publications out there who would be interested in that topic specifically. Now, the second thing you want to consider is the where, when, who, what, and why. That's good old-fashioned bread and butter journalism. Where is this happening? When it is happening? Who is it happening to? What is happening exactly? And why is this happening? What are the underlying factors? So for expensive and unfair MCAT preparation, where is it happening? Around the United States. When is it happening? Right now. Who is it happening to? Pre-health students. What is happening? The MCAT prep materials are really expensive and are often difficult to access if you're coming from a disenfranchised community. And why is this happening? That's where it gets real meaty and interesting. Is it happening because of selfish companies that are trying to make a profit for pre-health students? Is it happening because there's a market for it and people who are willing to pay for it will pay for it? That's where the why is really when it gets really interesting. I know we don't have a lot of time yet, so I'll go through these the next couple of sections. Why is this happening? That's really who's being affected. The other point that's really important to understand when you're writing a piece is, are you advocating for something or are you informing someone? If you're informing someone, you tend to leave your opinion out of it. We're all inherently biased. Your bias will always show no matter how pure you are about your piece. But if you're just informing people, you're presenting information and knowledge about an X topic. So for expensive and unfair MCAT preparation, you would just be presenting the prices and how the prices fluctuate and who can and cannot access those prices. You don't say anything yet. If you're advocating for something in your piece, then you have to really put your opinion front and center and then support it with expert opinion, with data, and with other interviews and sources from other individuals. So there's a difference between advocating for something and informing someone. They can often go together, but if you're writing just an informational piece, it's really important to leave your opinion out of it as best you can. Do you have a call to action? If you're going to write a piece, I really encourage you to have a call to action at the end. There's nothing more depressing than writing a story about mental health deficits in medical students, and then at the end have no call to action. You were telling me the story about how hard medical students have it, how mental health has been plummeting throughout the last decade, and how students are suffering. And then at the end, you don't give me any call to action or any hope. It's really important, guys, to leave the reader with something to do if you can. Even when you're just informing them, giving them some resources to get further informed. Call to actions in your non-academic writing are really important. If it's narrative medicine, that's a little different because you're writing poetry or a story. But if any other form of writing, a call to action is really important. And the last one is really just kind of, are you addressing someone specifically? Like, are you writing a letter to your congressmen or women, or your senators, or your school leadership, or are you writing to a general audience? And knowing these things before you even start writing will really make your writing a lot easier, more streamlined, and more likely to get published. Next slide. So these are some debriefs from what I said. The only things the only three things that I'd like to kind of focus on here before we go to the next slide is, if relevant, follow the money. If you're writing a story about, let's say, the lack of access for needle exchange programs in your city, and you know that there's no money available for that, figure out why. Why is money not going towards that kind of funding? All that information is public. It's just a Google away. Following the money can often lead to a really interesting story. Citations and statistics are very powerful. Even if you're writing a piece where you're advocating your opinion really strongly, statistics and citations can take your piece from a rant, where you're just ranting about something that you care about, to an advocacy piece and something that's really powerful. Do not try to incorporate citations and statistics into your pieces as much as you can, or as relevantly as they are, because it'll really make your writing a lot strong. And the last one is the only formal grammar tip I'll give you. Try to use the active voice. She drove the car. She is in the active action of driving the car, as opposed to the car was driven by her. You can look up a lot of examples on Google of active voice versus passive voice. This is a really important grammatical thing to think about when you write your piece, because this is one of the most common issues in pre-health students. Pre-health students, because they think academically and want to write in an academic context, tend to use the passive voice. But in non-academic writing, and really in most writing that is non-academic, just most writing overall, the active voice is really strong, and it will really set you apart from other submissions. And again, you don't have to be an expert in the field. And read as much as you can. The more you read, the better you're going to write. It can be anything, but read as much as you can. So I just wanted to highlight some of the pieces that we've published in the New Physician. As you can tell here, the topics really range. Remy wrote a piece about health at all sizes and non-diet nutrition. This was a really interesting piece about how nutrition is often only looked at as a form of dieting. So if you want better nutrition, it's all about the food that you're taking in. And while that's a really important component, she really talks about exposure to sunlight, sleeping well.
All right, everyone. In the meantime, while we're trying to get Andres back, we could just actually go ahead and start the Q&A session, since we are a little bit pressed for time.
Oh, okay.
That's all right, Andres. But thank you so much. We ended up with the examples of the books that you could read.
Yeah, that was the last one.
Awesome. So one of the questions we had in the chat was, does a non-academic publication count as a publication for a med school application?
Yes, it 100% does. Now you have to state what journal or what place you're publishing it in, obviously. So as you fill out your, let's say for med school, as you're filling out that as, in your activity section, for example, or even adding it to your resume if you're a MD PhD student, you would 100% add that into your publications. One of the things that I did for my application is I had a section of narrative writing that I've done, and then I had a section of journalistic writing that I did, and I outlined, I listed those publications, and yeah, it definitely counts as a publication. The only thing is you obviously have to cite it correctly when you write it into your application, and make sure you cite the journal that it's published in. So it could be the New Physician, it could be National Geographic, it could be MedEd online.
Awesome. Then the next question that we have is, especially for editorials, what is the publication process like, and how should I start trying to get my writing out there?
Excellent question. So the publication process is really going to depend between, it's going to depend between the different journal, the journal that you're going to publish in. So really a good way to get started is to reach out to a journal that you're interested in, let's say your school newspaper, and ask, hey, I'd like to submit a piece. Don't tell them what the piece is about. Just say, I'd like to submit a piece. What is your publication process? How can I get something published? The reason you don't want to reach out to a journal and say, hey, I would like to write about, how we don't have enough American Indian Native Americans in medical school. Well, if you just come out with a pitch like that without kind of like a short written version of the story, they'll just say, oh, another person who wants to write. But if you reach out with what the submission guidelines are, what the formative guidelines are ahead of time, they'll know that you're going to provide a better piece for them to edit. So reach out to the journal and ask them what the publication process is, because it is very different between people. And then write out a small little pitch for the story you want to write about and contact that journal again. The other thing that I really, things that you are worth asking is word count, and if they have grammar outlines that they can give you, because some journals will use the comma before the and, others won't. So just gathering all that information before that really sets you up well. And the other thing I would do is just do some research about the journal regarding what types of pieces they already publish. Just what's kind of their theme, what's kind of their tone. So
kind of in relation to that, what is your favorite publication that you have done?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm going to talk non-academic. Yeah, let me pull it up actually. I wrote a piece for my school newspaper, actually, here at the med school. I wrote a piece about the importance of medical Spanish in medical education. And I interviewed patients for that piece and asked them, how important is it that the physician that you work with, and these were non-English speakers, how important is it that the physician you work with speak Spanish, including English and Spanish? And the answers I was getting were really deep and really personal, really touching. People felt that they were actually heard and seen when their native languages were used, to the point that, some people avoided medical care entirely if they didn't think anybody at the facility could speak Spanish to them. So my whole piece was about, my piece was broken out into 3 parts. It was a set of interviews with patients and their experience with non-English and English speakers, a section about how it's more important in medical education and how that improving that will lead to better physicians and better outcomes. And then a section about how economically having Spanish speakers or other non-English speaking languages available for your patients yields to better results and saves you money. So that was a piece that it took me a long time to write, but it has a little bit of narrative, it has a little bit of information, and it also has money. And when money matters, people care. So that's one of my favorite pieces that I've ever written.
That sounds really awesome. Is there a way that we could read that? Is it published in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
specific
I
area
published
that
it's like 3 years ago. So if you go to the Daily Wildcat, and there's a search box in the Daily Wildcat, and you look up my name, just Andres Diaz, it should pop up. It's towards the bottom of the things that I've published for the newspaper. But I can also send you guys the link so you have something to look at.
Yeah, that would be great. You could actually put it in the chat for the attendees to see.
Yes, of course.
And for our last question, we also have what journals are best, or rather second to the last, what journals are best for undergraduates to try to publish in?
So I had a list in my slides of some. Is it possible to pull those up?
Yeah, I can pull those up.
You go to the publication opportunities.
Here we are.
So it does depend on right. It does depend on what type of writing you're going to do. If you want to do something more journalistic and informational in nature, I would recommend you submit to us at the New Physician. I give you guys the QR code. If you just look up the New Physician magazine, that's a really good place to start because we like pre-health undergrad students publishing. We actually encourage undergrads to publish, and we take a lot of undergraduate publications. Then if you look at a lot of professional medical student and physician organizations, they often have a section for medical students or for pre-health undergraduate students to publish. So if you reach out to them as an undergraduate and say, hey, I'm a member of this, I'm this student, I'm gonna apply for med school this year. I'd love to see if there's any opportunities for me to publish. Oh yeah, they're always looking for students. And then also to get started, I would really encourage you guys to look at your local or institutional periodicals. That's why I say like your city's newspaper, your school newspaper, your school's magazine. Like those magazines are always looking for undergraduate writing. And especially your local newspaper, believe it or not, loves to have pieces from students. And if you're a pre-health student talking about something that's medical in a non-academic setting for a local newspaper, they'll eat that right up. One, because it's really important, but two, it's important to like share that story, but two, because they get really good PR from having students publish in their publication. Now, if you're getting better with your writing, that's when I would start reaching out to like some of the bigger companies, online editorials like Medscape, GoodRx, the pharmaceutical company. They also publish a lot of student writing. Medscape, GoodRx, what else? The AMA, the Journal of the American Medical Student Association, will sometimes take undergraduate writing as well. And now if you're submitting narrative medicine, the Harmony magazine is a really good humanities magazine that takes writing from pre-health students. The Bellevue Literature Review loves undergraduate publications. And then any academic or creative writing groups in your institution or in your community. If you just Google writing groups near me, they can really help you find places for narrative medicine.
All right. Thank you so much, Andres. And then our last question for this session is, do you have any advice for pre-med students applying without any publications? Would this hold them back from being accepted?
So the question is twofold. The truth is a lot of people, a lot of undergrads submit their application for medical school without any publications. There are a few that have worked in labs or that have worked in, that have had the opportunity to work in a lab or had the opportunity to work with a mentor and have some academic publications. But it's really rare for me to go through our applications as someone who kind of works in admissions sometimes and see someone who's published in a non-academic journal. And it's so rare, in fact, that it actually looks really good because it shows a different side of you. So the truth is, you're not alone if you're publishing without any publications. Now things are getting more competitive, if I'm completely honest. So things are getting more competitive, so it helps if you have a publication, but it won't hold you back necessarily from being accepted. If you still have some time before your application to submit a quick story in your school newspaper, that can go a really long way. And the other thing I would say is, in your interviews, if you are interested in publishing, mention that. Like, oh, I don't have any current publications, but I just went to the seminar and I'm really motivated to start getting some non-academic publications out there. Schools really like when their students publish not only academically, but non-academically, because it puts them on the limelight. It puts them on the stage. A student from X institution wrote an op-ed about reproductive health rights in their school newspaper. It really gives them a lot of marketing and material, and it's also really morally important. So just telling them that you're interested about writing, even if you don't have a lot of publications in, can be really powerful. And as a student, if you start publishing for them, you can get a lot of cookie points with the administration. And also it's important. There's a lot that goes with that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Andres. And
A children's
for
book?
any other questions, yeah, we actually, since we are pressed for time, we actually could send you the email of Andres if you're interested.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. So, Andres, if you could kindly plug in that email at the chat before we end the session so that everybody could take it real quick.
Sorry for
And
running
just
over, guys. I hope you got something
No
out.
problem. No problem. It was such a great presentation, and I hope everyone also learned a lot from it and are actually more interested in writing in non-academic writing. But thank you so much, Andres.